Hey friends, since the national election, it seems that the Democratic Party is a party that's really looking for identity. There's no clear plan, there's no clear ideas. They got a platform that was soundly repudiated this last election cycle, and it seems like all they have going for them is a whole lot of cursing and profanity, and a couple of radical leftist progressives who are running around the country warning us that there's an oligarchy that's threatening to take away all of our rights. I mean, it's really ridiculous and pathetic. And so they've reverted to one strategy that's the only strategy that they have, and that's progressive judicial activist judges who are trying to govern from the bench. We're going to talk about why that's such a big problem and what we need to do to stop it in today's podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
We are so excited you guys are with us. Got so much to share with you. So many amazing things are happening. In fact, we've said this before, it almost feels like Christmas every day in America. We'll explain. We'll elaborate, but good things are happening. Good things are happening here on the home front. You got a little shock today.
Yeah, I drove to the church, and I come through the back entrance where our old youth room was, and I'm normally used to see that our poor little hole in the roof, and I looked up, and it was a way bigger hole. And for like a microsecond, I was in panic. I was like, "Oh no, everything has collapsed!" And I remember demolition started today, so I was like, "Okay, all right, it's actually good."
So by the time this is airing, you will see the west side of our building looking radically different. And we were joking around on Sunday. We give an announcement. Hey, this week our building gets demolished, and everybody's like, "Wow!" And it just seemed kind of weird. You're not thinking people are getting jazzed about destroying a building, but as we know, I love that passage where the Lord spoke to Jeremiah and commissioned him, and he talked about uprooting and knocking down and before you build back up, and I really feel like what's happening with our building, we can't see this new edifice arise out of the ashes until you get rid of the rubble. And I feel like it's kind of a paradigm about what's happening in our nation right now, because the demolition crews are knocking down a lot of corroded, corrupted, government structure that needs to be demolished, frankly. And we're seeing the wrecking ball happen, not in a destructive way, as some are arguing, right? But in a way that simply highlights the fact that there's a lot of useless, empty buildings, damaged buildings, poorly laid foundations, and everything else, government waste, corruption. And let's do the American taxpayers a favor and let's demolish it, and then let's clean up the mess. And I think that's what's happening here, and I think people are excited about it because we've been looking at that unsightly roof for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I never thought I'd be so excited for a demolition and walls coming down. Man, looking through that youth room, you can see everything in there now and all the good memories you have. So there's definitely some grieving and some pain.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, my lovely wife took a picture and put it on our family text message and group text. And, a lot of my children already responded, "Wow, I'm sad." So many good memories, Don't you love it when people remember where God encountered them, where they were touched, where they had a breakthrough, where they met the Lord? I mean, that's holy ground. And I remember before that roof was put on that building, it was just a shell. The walls were up, but no roof. And we had an all-night prayer meeting. I think it was February. We had a giant drum that we built a fire in, and we worshiped and praised the Lord under an open sky over that building, And a lot of great years of youth ministry have gone on. Well,
tons of encounters in that room.
Encounters and Celebrate Recovery.
Marriages.
The list goes
weddings.
on. Marriage, Yep, all of the above. In fact, remember when our pipe burst and it ruined our existing,
I remember that.
The chapel, what we call the chapel now, and flooded it. We instantly pivoted to that youth room, and I think for probably 6 or 8 weeks, we had church in there on Sunday morning.
That was good times.
That was a good time.
It was a tough, but it was fond memories.
Yeah, and I really believe, I was just talking with Matthew this morning, I want to make sure we capture some pictures of that collapse roof. It's part of our history. It's going to be part of our restoration journey, that we will look back and say, hey, look how faithful God was. So anyway, praise the Lord.
Well, I was at a wedding. You and I were at a wedding on Saturday in the chapel. I haven't sat in the chapel as a service in 6 months, for a long time, right? I mean, thinking back now. And I sat in there, I was like, I can't believe we used to have church in here. It seems so small now, right?
Yeah,
it's like, how do we fit?
Small. And I noticed also the echo. The sound is much better in our new facility.
So these things that you don't really even notice. You're like, I don't know how we did, 3 services. And then my wife was like, we had the overflow. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, how do we fit all the people in here?
But anyway, it's all good. And that's why I love that song that our worship team picked out yesterday that encouraged us to look back and remember how far we've come and what God has done. And it just hit me, when I think of what the Lord has done in the last 6 or 8 years in terms of the, one building project packed on the next. And just seeing, the transformation of what's happened and really a short amount of time, just the rapid restoration of the Lord to our ministry, what the enemy tried to steal from us, God paid back, as the one proverb says, sevenfold. The enemy must pay back sevenfold, and the Lord's doing that right now. Of course, we highlighted your son's amazing stone, the artwork from our children's ministry, and that is in our foyer. It looks incredible, and some of the things the kids wrote, I love a lot of them talked about. Praise the Lord for iron or for steel roofs. Kids have a great sense of humor. We got a steel roof coming, and it's going to be awesome. Yes. But anyway. And you need to ask me about where I was last week.
Yeah, I know. We've been keeping everyone in suspense. So last week, you kind of disappeared for 2 or 3 days. Went in deep. So you went down to Georgia, huh?
I went to a Turning Point USA pastors event called Faith Forward. And man, it was a great time. A wonderful word to describe it was the word euphoria. I mean, people were energized, fired up, excited about the direction we're headed as a nation. Excited about some of the changes in policy, just feeling optimistic, full of hope. I mean, we had, of course, Charlie Kirk, who is just impacting this younger generation, just going, like we shared last week, going face to face, talking about issues live, unscripted, and just sharing the truth, unfiltered truth, and exposing worldviews that just don't hold their weight, showing that they're deficient, that they don't answer the questions or whatever. So anyway, that was really, really great. Ben Carson was there, John Bevere, Lance Wallnau, Eric Metaxas, and a host of others who are involved, up to their ears in public, transformation. Of course, Jennison Franklin and his wonderful ministry. But it was just top-notch, excellent, and very not only inspirational. Rob McCoy, of course, Charlie Kirk's pastor, shared, and just amazing time. So
Micah Beckwith was there.
Micah, yes, our lieutenant governor was there. Micah did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, we were actually on the call, and Pastor Ron didn't silence his mic, and someone start preaching on the back. I muted him because I couldn't hear what the other person on the Zoom call was going to say. And then Pastor muted himself and say, "Hey, that person was Micah Beckwith." I was like, "Oh man!"
Yeah, of all the times to have a call, I had to miss my buddy Micah, and he was just sharing again the importance of being involved, and of course getting the local churches energized and active once again in the marketplace. So kudos to Micah, great job. Proud that he's our lieutenant governor.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
So anyway, but euphoria is a good word because here's the deal. If you're watching the news, the left is having an epic meltdown. Recently, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, was being interviewed by Tony Perkins, I believe. But he said that this was on this week on Capitol Hill. He said it's really something to see. The Democratic Party is a party without a leader, without vision, without a plan. Not to mention, he pointed out they have no platform they can run on because it was absolutely repudiated in the last election cycle. And he says, and so you see them falling apart. So they've got no party platform, no plan, but all they have, he says, is profanity. And that's what you're seeing, you know. There's no sense of decorum, and this goes back to biblical worldview and morality. You know, when you're a publicly elected official, you're representing your state, right, or a portion of your state. To talk like you're a drunken sailor every time you're out in public is just, you know, not only immoral and inappropriate, but it's like, come on, seriously? How did you get elected when you have such a potty mouth, you know? And you have no shame about talking that way in a public arena. And so what we have now in the Democratic Party is, think about this. We have two of the most radical leftists. If you had to pick two people that were out of touch with mainstream Americans, certainly out of touch with the foundation of this nation, right? The foundational principles. We have Bernie Sanders, who's a Marxist. I mean, he's a commie. He is one of the most far left-leaning senators. Again, I have no idea what is the matter with the people of Vermont. We need to go plant a church up in Vermont and start working on that state. These people are brain dead. How does this guy get elected? Bernie Sanders, a leftist, a Marxist. And then we have this progressive nut job, AOC, who's let's just say she's not the brightest light out there, all right? When she calls Elon Musk, you know, an idiot or not very smart or whatever she said about Elon Musk, and not to mention that the most overlooked news item was the fact that Elon Musk went out to outer space and retrieved two pilots or two astronauts that were stuck. And nobody even talks about this. Like, are you kidding me? Who has the brilliance to do that? But anyway, nevertheless, this lady who was a former bartender who auditioned for the job and they got her elected, and now she's basically a leftist mouthpiece. This is the face of the Democratic Party. I mean, these people should be, you know, scared, because if this is your future, holy cow.
I think they did a poll of who do you think is the leader, the face of the party. I think AOC was like at top with 8%. So it wasn't like super high. I think Bernie's down there. Harris is down there somewhere. Tim Walz is way down there. I don't remember all the names and whatnot.
Well, not to mention Tough Tim running around now, you know, throwing out his chest like he wants to pick fight with Republicans.
I don't really
Tim,
get,
you're an absolute sissy.
Yeah, I don't get the whole whatever. I don't even want to talk about Tim Walz, but it's interesting because, you know, they had this rally, AOC and Bernie Sanders has this rally that supposedly attracted, you know, record-sized crowd. I mean, there's also a report that says, you know, they did the geo-tracking on the phones. They realized like 80% of the people has been through like 10 different rallies already. So they're groupies.
These are professional leftists, yeah, like you said. They're leftist instigators who are probably paid.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what the truth is, but there's some evidence that these are people who they travel to rally to rallies. Maybe, I don't know. But the point is, and there was another article that came out on Fox News that says, why are these guys, AOC and Bernie, campaigning so hard when we're really, really far? We're light years away from the midterms.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness, we just had the election.
Right, and the argument they're making, I forgot the name of the person who wrote the article, is that they're really trying to hold the party together. They're trying to show that the progressive left is still the brand of the Democrat Party, and they need to show that we still can draw a large crowd because they're so directionless. Because look at what Newsom's doing. Newsom, in his effort to pitch for 2028, is pivoting in the middle. Chuck Schumer basically had to sign the CR, continuing resolution. So there is a civil war going on in the Democrat Party.
And this was crazy because Johnson points out here, this continuing resolution that 99% of the Democrats voted against to shut down the government. They voted against the largest pay increase for enlisted troops in history. They voted against funding Border Patrol agents, TSA agents at the airport, all federal employees, and every agency of the country. 99% of the Democrats. Schumer actually voted in favor of the budget resolution,
right?
And now Pelosi's attacking him, and all the Democratic major faces are attacking this guy, who is the Senate leader for them, you know? And it's just amazing. It shows you the internal combustion that's happening. And so here's the deal. When you can't figure out what you stand for anymore, you just go out and have a rally where you yell and scream and cuss, and you have all these paid operatives come in, and for an optic standpoint, it looks like there's actually traction, like you're having resistance, like you're fighting back. But the best you have is burning Teslas. That's the best you have is violence, which is what we saw all along. When these folks do not get their way, when these folks do not have power, they don't resort to better ideas or communicating or running a better election or any of those things. It's all about violence. It's violence and destruction. That is your platform. It did not work the last time around, and I don't think it's going to work the next time around.
Well, the traditional platform for the Democrats, at least some of these, were like, anti-war. That's not going on anymore. That's they don't have that anymore. Caring for the middle class, which is everyone purports to, but the current administration is actually actively trying to do that. Curb government spending and corruption, which is, again, they no longer have that anymore, right? So all they have is basically attack billionaires, because you got a bunch of billionaires working in the government, but some of these billionaires are, this is whether you trust them or not. But the people who trust these billionaires are saying these guys are taking not a cent to be able to curb, government corruption and whatnot. So there's really, I thought from the standpoint, if I was a Democrat, I don't really even know what direction to go. Because, what is the piece that's going to draw my attention? The big thing is we're going to get into the whole trans in the sport, trans and that's not going to work out so well. But that's their direction. Where else do you go with it?
Right. And so you got you got this administration that are acting on a mandate, which, by the way, when you go out and talk across America, as Speaker Johnson is doing, he says there's almost, to use the word I used earlier, a sense of euphoria, that there's a sense of patriotic pride and excitement that we truly feel like America is back. But here's the problem. So if that's the general, consensus among the people out there on the street, and yet you have the media and the Democrats who are just scrambling, trying to discredit something, trying to find something wrong, trying to find something that they can gain traction on. It's not working. And now, so when that happens, there's only one option, and that's you revert to the courts. And so what we're seeing is a strategy among Obama appointees, Biden appointees. A lot of these are progressive, Soros-funded people who have been appointed as judges now. And the only way they can stop this momentum is to have an overreach of judicial tyranny or judicial activism, where they actually think they can start ruling and governing and making policy, from the bench. And again, in this article from FRC on judicial activism, he said, to put it in perspective, John Fund pointed out in the National Review, last month alone, district court judges issued 15 temporary restraining orders halting actions of the Trump administration. 15 in the last month. This is out of control. And this is clearly a strategy. They figure if we can tell, if some judge somehow just, declares that whatever the action was unconstitutional, then okay, that put on the brakes, we cannot do that. And so now we're facing a true constitutional crisis, not one of these made up ones that the Democrats always talk about, just like when Trump got elected. But this is a true constitutional crisis, because the question then becomes, wait a minute, do you guys as a federal judge have the right to stop the actions of the President of the United States, who was not appointed like you are, but who was duly elected by the citizens of this nation and elected to enact the agenda that the American people resonated with? And so this is a serious example, multiple examples of judicial overreach, which is really creating a constitutional crisis. And especially, so let's get back to what you talked about. Recently, Judge Anna Reyes, U.S. District of Columbia, which is, again, they're shopping these districts. They're looking for liberal, progressive, activist judges to bring, the case before, because they know they'll get somebody that will stand up and call it unconstitutional or whatever. So here this woman stopped the president from implementing his ban on trans-identifying soldiers. Even the speaker was astonished. He said, quote, "You're talking about the president serving as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. That's the president's prerogative. It's the president's policies that we should enforce, not some judge that's not involved in the military at all. That's not how this works." And so, one of the things that we saw, Tony Perkins made a point here that this was first done. This has never been done before as far as trans folks serving in the military. This took place in 2017. In the final days, as President Obama was leaving, this was one of those drive-by shooting pieces of legislation where he just made this to be the law. But prior to 2017, you didn't have men pretending to be women in the armed forces or women pretending to be men. And here's why. This was an analysis done by the Family Research Council, which helped to shape the 2017 policy decision. That was when actually President Trump reversed Obama's policy. The projected cost of allowing transgender individuals to serve, which was before active recruitment began under the Biden administration, ready for this, was an estimated $1.88 billion, taxpayer dollars, over 10 years. He says it's even more now. The staggering price reflects taxpayer dollars that would have been used for medical treatments like hormone therapy and surgeries, transgender surgeries, along with the cost of lost service time because of these treatments. So, when you think about it just on the surface level, the military is not an equal opportunity employment agency, right? You serve your country, and it's a privilege, and there's certain folks, certain people that simply are disallowed to be in the military. Like myself, I was born with club feet, so I would not be able to enlist and serve in the military because of the problem with my feet. People that are overweight or obese, obviously you can't pass a physical exam. It doesn't mean you hate obese people or you hate people with physical deformities or challenges. It simply means you do not have what it takes to defend our nation. You would be a liability. Well, a man who thinks he's a woman or a woman who thinks she's a man is a definite liability, let alone when you enlist and then you want the government to pay for your surgery.
Right, because you're responsible for your health care at that point.
Yeah, which is what many of these, that's a strategy. Like, oh, I don't have the money to pay for my transgender surgery, so I will join the armed forces and let the taxpayers pay for this nonsense. I mean, who in their right mind would be for this, or who in their right mind would consider this animus, which is what one of the federal judges said, that Trump's policy was based on animus, on hatred, on prejudice. How about on common sense? That's what this policy is based on, common sense.
But and I didn't read the judgment, but that's a really slippery slope. If a judge basically can say, hey, I know you and you're a mean person and you don't get to be mean, therefore I don't like your law. Yeah. That's a school ground argument. That's not a federal judge
arguing
argument.
That the intent of your law was rooted somehow in hatred.
Sure. And I don't know the full argument, but that itself is, oh man, that's sketchy.
But again, the purpose is look at the law from that's what you do from a legal standpoint. You can't infer somebody's motivation behind it. And just to put this in perspective, so we're talking about almost $2 billion. To put it in perspective, those funds could purchase 22 F-35 fighter jets, 116 Chinook helicopters, 3,700 Tomahawk missiles, or a Navy destroyer. I mean, if the goal of the military is not to chop off some woman's bosoms or to somehow re-engineer a man's private parts so that he can have a fake period and pretend like he's a girl, if we're actually focused on being the most lethal fighting, group in the nation and in the world, and if our job is to protect the United States of America from foreign threats, why in the world would we put up with this type of stupidity? And why would we fund it with taxpayer dollars? And how in the world can a judge arbitrarily just simply say, oh, no, you can't do that? That is an absolute crossing over of of that person's sphere of authority. And if we don't say no and we don't put some stops to it and don't get back to the Constitution and clearly, and again, what I appreciate about Speaker Johnson, he's a constitutional expert. That's the type of law he practiced before he became Speaker. So this is a man who's very, very familiar with the ins and outs of the United States Constitution. And he's saying, that number one, they're going to be doing some study committees in Congress to begin looking at this and to provide some suggestions. But Congress actually has the power to curtail the power of the courts and even to to disband certain courts, to get rid of them altogether. And perhaps they need to look at that. And I think they will be. But this is crazy. He said military service must be reserved for those who are both mentally and physically fit to serve. This was Judge Reyes's ruling. She called the Trump policy unabashedly demeaning and soaked in animus. Why is it demeaning? Because you actually tell people, I'm sorry, you do not have the qualifications of what it takes to serve in the United States Armed Forces.
Yeah, those are subjective. I mean, these are legal terms. I get it, animus and demeaning. But again, just like you're demeaning someone else, I could say, hey, your decision is demeaning to my worldview. Your decision is demeaning to my vote. So that hence not good legal decision from a judge. So this is where this is where the Constitution, this is where human nature comes in, because the separation of government is for accountability. It's saying, one central king or emperor will not be good for governing the United States, because we don't want kings, we don't want centrality of power. We're following human natures and we need accountability. But when these branches, each branch, start to do their own thing and don't understand the lanes they're in. And many people argue that Trump is outside his lane, but when everyone is doing their own thing, this is what happens. Because basically, they're almost playing chicken and saying, hey, I dare you to ignore my decision. Now we have a constitutional crisis. So it's just a mess.
Well, it is. And, when you don't have humility and you don't have a sense that you're serving the American people, you're not serving your own agenda, which brings up another point. The reason we're hearing so much screaming is because the left's entire funding mechanism, which is a shell game, is being cut off. Let's take, for instance, what's going on in public education, more in particular with the teachers' unions, all right? So the teachers' unions get money. Public education gets money. Those teachers' unions then take taxpayer dollars and they fund radical left candidates. And so radical left candidates vote for funding of the Department of Education and the unions. The unions then take the money and they send it back to the candidates of their choice. And it's this ugly cycle where everybody gets a piece of the pie except the American people, who keep getting ripped off. This is happening over and over and over again. So it's the same thing with Planned Parenthood. I just saw some good news where some major Planned Parenthood offices were shutting down. And the reason they're shutting down is the gravy train got cut off. And I hope they go far enough and actually completely defund Planned Parenthood, because they should have no business in getting any of our dollars to do what they do and commit the atrocities that they commit. But same thing with Planned Parenthood. They get government funding. They take that government funding. They spend it on getting the people elected who voted for their government funding. And the Trump administration is exposing all of this corruption, and that's why people are squealing. And I just applaud, again, this administration for moving ahead and doing what many Republicans have said that they need to do, wanted to do, but didn't have the courage to do, and that's to begin to defund and disband this behemoth called the Department of Education, which has done nothing to improve education in America. Nothing.
Yeah, our scores keep going down. But I mean, it's a really interesting, it's not a Ponzi scheme, money laundering
it's
scheme.
It's kind of like a Ponzi scheme, isn't it?
I'm like, man, how do we get a piece? How do we don't get a piece of this gravy train? We just need to be a lobby. We need to have our super PAC. And
well, you're making a joke about us being part of the gravy train, but that's exactly what the religious left in America is a gravy train. There's another article I got.
I didn't even know what you had here, so that was not unintentional.
Hey, we didn't plan this.
I'm just trying to innovate. I'm trying to raise some funds for our rise, right? How do we get in the Ponzi scheme of the U.S. government?
That's why you sit in this seat right here. It's because the value that you add to this experience.
That was a joke.
I got to make
it's
that
not
clear.
real. I'm not trying to get in the gravy train. Anyways.
So how about this one? This headline. Leftist faith leaders twisting the Bible to support wasteful government spending. When you have a bunch of people dressed like peacocks, and I'm talking about the fancy gowns and the robes and the scarves and all the stuff that they do to show that they're religious folks, these people are protesting against Doge, and the reason that they are calling for burning Teslas and for raging in hotel lobbies and on college campuses and defending Hamas supporter and cursing up a storm at their rallies is because their money's being touched. And so here we have 100 progressive religious folks who signed a letter demanding an unbiblical return to Jesus. This Lent letter demanded that hundreds of millions of dollars of wasted taxpayer dollars continue to flow to leftist NGOs. So here we have the progressive left who happen to be religious, who use the Bible, and really what they're supporting is not a biblical ethic. They're supporting social justice and critical race theory. And under the guise of social justice, they're saying we have to quit cutting all this money that's going to NGOs, which are, for the most part, non-for-profit organizations, right? Non-government organizations, many of them, quote, dedicated to humanitarian efforts. What we're finding out, though, is there's very little money actually going to the cause for which they espouse to be in existence for. In other words, a lot of this is going to overhead. It's going to hefty salaries to people who are administrating these organizations that do nothing. And let's get to the biblical issue here. It was never the Bible's teaching that the government is supposed to care for the poor. That has been usurped by a bloated federal bureaucracy. That was supposed to be done by the local church. And in fact, the local church could do a better job of helping the poor. Local people could do a better job of helping the needy in their communities if we were not taxed and robbed blind by the federal government and then have them waste our dollars on all kinds of leftist, radical, ungodly issues. So the issue they're trying to make is you're hurting people because you're cutting off all these government programs, to which we would say, number one, you're not helping people very much anyway with this money, and number two, you're wasting it, and number two, you're stealing it from the taxpayers' pockets. And then finally, this isn't even biblical in the first place. This should be done by local churches caring for local people for whom they have a relationship with. In other words, this should be personal help done locally in local communities.
Because the best way to help someone is just give them straight money and have no accountability. That's the best way to, from some mailers, that could never go wrong. You get a check from the federal government that's never held anyone accountable. I'm sure no one's ever abused it. No one's ever taken advantage of it. No one's ever, not pushed themselves to work or get a job, because I'm sure it's never happened.
Exactly. And again, the left's plantation that have kept our inner city and urban folks on the plantation for years, getting government handouts, government checks in the mail, again, with no incentive to change or grow or to truly help these people. This is a fake form of compassion.
I saw a video, and again, I don't have any reference, I wasn't prepared, but this lady from Africa, she's a government official, just saying, these NGO funds weren't to help our people. They're to destabilize our government. They're plans to de-establish what we have established democratically.
Yeah, a lot of these countries, especially in Africa, are
like,
deeply religious. They're Christian nations. They've been influenced by the gospel for years and years and years. And then our government, under the Justice Department or State Department, whatever other department,
USAID,
then they go in and they spend our tax dollars to push this progressive agenda or to remove funding altogether because people are not. And again, the same thing has happened in public education. You're going to push the LGBTQ agenda. You're going to push the trans ideology, or we're going to take away your federal funding. I mean, enough is enough. And I think people are sick and tired of this. In fact, I know they're sick and tired. That's why there's such incredible approval ratings for this administration, in spite of what you read or hear about in the news, which isn't true. The average American, I think, is doing cartwheels.
Rasmussen just came out. I think Trump has a 52%, the administration 52% approval, which is huge, so.
So, and this was one of the messages that was brought up at TPUSA, is that we really have to keep our eye on the ball. We cannot sit back and say, yay, you know, this is great. We're winning. It feels good to win again. Yes, it does feel good. But some of these things are deeply entrenched, and we have got to be committed to demand that they are completely removed. You know, for instance, Trump said, you know what, we're not going to have men who think they're women competing against girls in sports. Well, some of your liberal states are basically giving Trump the middle finger. They're saying, you know, we're going to do whatever we want. We're not going to change policy. And so at some point, there's going to be a collision here. Same thing with the mayor of Denver. Same thing with Illinois, who, you know, Mr. Pritzker, who's deeply invested in all the money that goes into transgenderism. His own family's involved in that personally. So these are folks that are deeply religiously, ideologically committed, and yet they're openly, flagrantly disobeying, you know, the law. So what do you do? And I don't know if you saw this, but some of these state competitions, I feel sorry for these young ladies who have trained, competed, and have their moment in glory to win a state championship or whatever. And these guys are blowing away all these records. It's a joke. It's the clearest indication that your ideology is wrong, and you're actually going to destroy women's sports in the process, or hurt women in the process. And again, but they're thumbing their nose at the administration. And I think until some people go to jail, I don't know if the message is going to get across.
You know who agrees with you? The governor of California.
Yeah, that's one thing we got.
I'm just saying, someone's like, hey, you're a big... I'm like, it's not just me. It's the governor of California who agrees with me. So what do I say?
It's a lot of political animals who are realizing I don't stand a chance unless I start moving more to a common sense position. And we'll see how serious he is about that.
No, but he said it. He said it.
Yeah,
so
he said
I'm going to quote that all day long. I'm going to use that all day long. Someone calls me a bigot. I'm like, I'm just agreeing with Gavin Newsom. I don't know what to tell you.
Now, those would be fighting words not too long ago, because if you told me you're agreeing with Governor Newsom, I'd be checking your credentials to see why in the world have you sitting next to me.
We live in a new world, Pastor Ron. We live in a brand new world.
It's a strange world. Yeah. It's a totally strange world. Yeah. And new alliances and all of that. Yeah. But bottom line is, you know, let's back up a little bit here. That's what's all happening in public policy and in the, you know, the public arena out there. But the flip side is, you know, as we're looking at the kingdom and Jesus and what's happening to see people come to know the Lord, man, God is moving all over. People's lives are being touched. There's a fresh hunger in people's hearts for truth. They're looking for answers. You know, Charlie Kirk was talking about that as he goes on university campuses. People are asking really good questions, and people are open to hearing truth, and a lot of young people are searching, you know, for answers. And they realize this progressive left nonsense has not given them any answers. It's gloom, doom, despair, hopelessness. And the gospel provides hope and provides a future and provides a worldview in which you can find your place, you can live, you can make sense out of this thing called life, and you can live a meaningful, rewarding life. So, you know, I'm incredibly excited. I feel like we're in an amazing season. I want to put the pedal to the metal and keep, you know, being more committed to sharing the gospel and loving people, doing what we do here every week at Living Stones.
Last week we had like 90 some people get baptized.
Yeah, it was awesome. People hungry for God, hungry to identify, and this again, this young generation, high school students. You know, we just had a prayer meeting last night. All these young people showing up, and after the prayer meeting, they were all huddled up with their arms around each other, you know, crying out to God for their generation. You know, it's exciting, and so anyway, it's just a good time to be alive. I want to mention as well on Memorial Weekend on that Saturday. Let me say, I guess it's going to be all day Sunday and Sunday night. We have Bill Federer, who's coming. We're going to be announcing this pretty soon once we get past Easter, but I want to let our listeners know Bill Federer is one of the, you know, leading Christian historians. He's a brilliant man. And when you think of historian, you think, you know, some guy sharing facts about people, places, things. No, not at all. This guy is dynamic. He's an incredible communicator. He makes history enlightening, and he highlights America's godly heritage. He talks about freedom of speech and all these things, the flow of ideas that have led to America being the great nation that we are today.
Well, as I get older, I realize history is actually historians are super helpful because they're essentially seers of the future.
Absolutely.
The same pattern happens, and they can recognize those patterns, and they say, hey, this is what's happening right now. So they can give us a pinpoint where we're going. That's what historians do.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, put that date on your calendar.
Yeah.
It's going to be really, really awesome, and I'm so grateful that Bill is coming. So anyway, we're so glad that you guys joined us today. Thanks so much. Continue to let us know that you're out there, that you're listening or watching, whatever the case might be. And please like it and share this podcast with as many people as possible. I'm biting my tongue right now to tell you a whole bunch of other really exciting things coming down the pike, but I'm going to be good. Go ahead, pat me on the back.
Good job. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel better.
Learn to have the tease, you know.
Yeah, but anyway, until next Thursday, we'll look forward to seeing you then.